Sometimes the greatest misunderstanding begins with a single moment of silence. The crystal chandeliers of the Grand Regency Hotel bathed Manhattan's most prestigious charity gala in a warm golden glow, scattering reflections across polished marble floors where philanthropists, business leaders, architects, and public officials gathered to celebrate the future of communities that had long been forgotten. Waiters moved gracefully between elegant tables dressed in white linen, while a string quartet filled the ballroom with gentle melodies that blended seamlessly with quiet conversation. At the center of it all stood Ava Carter, a 29-year-old black architect whose vision had transformed the Harbor Point Community Renewal Project into the city's most inspiring development. Her emerald evening gown reflected understated elegance, but it was the quiet confidence in her eyes that drew attention wherever she walked. She had spent years proving that talent, compassion, and perseverance could accomplish what wealth alone never could. Tonight she had promised herself that she would accept her award with grace, leave quietly, and never allow old emotions to disturb the life she had fought so hard to rebuild. Across the ballroom, William Harrison entered with the composed presence that had made him one of America's most respected billionaires. At 36, the white founder and chairman of Harrison Development carried success with remarkable restraint. His tailored navy tuxedo, calm gray eyes, and measured expression reflected a man who understood responsibility better than celebration. Yet despite the applause that greeted his arrival, his attention searched only one face among hundreds. The moment he saw Ava standing beneath the soft light beside the stage, the rest of the ballroom seemed to disappear. Weeks had passed since she had walked away without giving him the chance to explain what had truly happened, and every day since then had reminded him that even extraordinary success could never replace one person's trust. Before William could make his way toward her, Victoria Langford appeared beside him with practiced confidence. Wearing an elegant ivory suit and a flawless smile perfected through years in public relations, she greeted several reporters who immediately surrounded them with cameras flashing from every direction. William politely stepped aside, hoping to avoid another misunderstanding, but questions arrived faster than answers. Headlines had already begun writing themselves before a single truthful sentence could be spoken. Standing across the ballroom, Ava watched the familiar scene unfold. Victoria smiled comfortably beside William, while photographers eagerly captured another series of polished images that seemed to confirm every painful rumor she had tried so hard to dismiss. She lowered her eyes for only a moment before gathering the strength to walk away forever. Then Victoria deliberately crossed the ballroom carrying a champagne flute. As she passed Ava, the glass slipped from her hand, sparkling liquid cascading across the emerald fabric. The surrounding conversations faded instantly into silence. Victoria offered a carefully measured apology that sounded polite enough for strangers but sharp enough for only Ava to understand. At that moment, William finally reached them, unaware of everything that had just happened. Ava lifted her eyes and searched his face for the reassurance she once believed she would always find there. Instead, another wave of reporters surrounded them before he could speak. To Ava, his silence felt painfully familiar. Years of defending her dignity in rooms where powerful voices always seemed louder than her own rushed back in a single overwhelming heartbeat. She stepped forward with quiet resolve, looked directly into William's eyes, and raised her hand. The sound echoed gently across the magnificent ballroom as every conversation stopped. Crystal glasses remained suspended above untouched tables while musicians slowly lowered their instruments. William did not move. He simply looked at Ava with sadness rather than anger, understanding that her wounded heart had reacted to a story someone else had written. Then, with remarkable calm, he took one careful step closer, his eyes never leaving hers, and as the entire ballroom held its breath, he reached toward her with quiet tenderness, preparing to answer heartbreak not with pride, but with a gesture that no one present would ever forget. 4 weeks earlier, the first Monday of October welcomed Manhattan beneath a clear blue sky as the morning sun reflected from glass towers stretching above the Hudson River. Ava Carter stepped through the revolving doors of Harrison Development carrying a leather portfolio filled with carefully prepared architectural drawings that represented nearly 6 months of research, interviews, and community planning. At 29, she had already earned a reputation for designing neighborhoods that placed people before profit, believing that every family deserved beautiful public spaces regardless of income. She had not come to impress anyone. She had come to defend a vision she refused to compromise. The executive conference room occupied the highest floor of the building, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the endless skyline of New York City. Warm walnut walls, minimalist artwork, polished stone surfaces, and scale models of future developments reflected decades of disciplined success. Around the conference table sat senior executives reviewing financial reports while quiet conversations filled the room. At precisely 9 o'clock, the doors opened once again, and William Harrison entered carrying nothing more than a leather notebook and a cup of black coffee. Every conversation ended immediately. Without seeking attention, he greeted each executive with calm professionalism before taking his place at the head of the table. Ava studied him for only a brief moment. The newspapers described him as one of the most powerful real estate developers in America, a man famous for precision, discipline, and impossible standards. She expected arrogance. Instead, she found remarkable composure. The presentation began. Ava carefully explained how Harbor Point would transform abandoned waterfront property into affordable housing, public gardens, schools, libraries, and community centers designed to strengthen neighborhoods for generations. Every decision had been shaped by conversations with teachers, nurses, city planners, and families who dreamed of raising children somewhere they could truly call home. As the final presentation slide disappeared, quiet approval spread around the room until William calmly closed the proposal folder resting before him. "Your concept is inspiring," he said evenly. "Now explain why your budget exceeds comparable developments by nearly 11%. Ava answered without hesitation. "Because lasting communities require lasting investment." William remained thoughtful. "Investors expect measurable returns." Ava met his gray eyes without lowering her gaze. "Healthy neighborhoods create measurable returns. They simply take longer than quarterly reports to prove it." Several executives exchanged uncertain glances. No consultant had spoken to William Harrison with such direct confidence in years. Instead of challenging her further, William turned another page and continued asking detailed questions regarding environmental design, operating costs, maintenance projections, educational partnerships, and long-term sustainability. Ava answered each one with facts supported by careful preparation rather than emotion. Nearly an hour passed before William finally closed his notebook and looked around the conference table. "Miss Carter has defended every recommendation with evidence instead of opinion." One executive quietly objected, pointing out that Harbor Point represented the largest project Ava had ever managed. William answered without raising his voice. "Responsibility should be given to people who are prepared for it, not merely those who have held it before." The room fell silent. Ava herself looked surprised. The meeting concluded shortly afterward, and as employees gathered their papers, William approached her near the panoramic windows overlooking the river. "Miss Carter," he said calmly, "do not mistake difficult questions for disagreement. I ask the hardest questions when I believe something deserves protecting." Ava considered his words before offering a restrained smile. "Then I hope one day you learn that some investments cannot be measured on a balance sheet." For the first time that morning, a faint smile appeared across William's face. It lasted only a second before professionalism quietly returned. As the elevator doors closed behind Ava and carried her toward the busy streets below, neither of them realized that what had begun as a simple business meeting would soon become the most important chapter either life had ever written. The Harbor Point project quickly became the most talked about development inside Harrison Development, not because of its impressive scale but because of the quiet determination shared by two people who refused to compromise their principles. 3 mornings each week, Ava Carter arrived before sunrise carrying freshly revised blueprints beneath one arm and a notebook filled with handwritten observations collected from neighborhood residents. She believed architecture was never simply about buildings. It was about giving families a reason to believe tomorrow could be better than yesterday. William Harrison arrived only minutes later with the same disciplined routine that had guided every year of his professional life. A tailored charcoal suit, black coffee, and the worn leather notebook he trusted more than any digital device became familiar parts of each morning. Their meetings always began with numbers and schedules. They almost always ended with conversations that reached far beyond construction. One cool autumn afternoon, they stood together on the Harbor Point construction site overlooking the Hudson River as steel beams stretched toward a cloudless sky. Construction crews moved methodically across the growing framework while cranes lifted enormous sections of structural steel into place with remarkable precision. William carefully reviewed the latest site drawings before pointing toward the waterfront entrance. If we reduce the public garden by 30 feet, we can expand the retail section and improve long-term revenue. Ava folded her arms and looked across the empty space where children would someday play beneath rows of maple trees. The garden is part of the revenue. William looked at her with quiet curiosity rather than disagreement. Explain your reasoning. Ava stepped closer to the blueprint spread across the temporary planning table. Families remain in neighborhoods where children have safe places to gather. Local businesses succeed when people enjoy spending time outside. Property values remain stable because communities become stronger together. The garden creates returns that simply cannot be measured during the first fiscal year. William listened without interrupting. Nearby engineers quietly exchanged glances, expecting another lengthy debate. Instead, William asked only one question. How many interviews support that conclusion? Ava answered immediately. 170 families, 14 teachers, 6 pediatric specialists, and 3 city planners. For the first time since the project began, William allowed a genuine smile to appear. You defend your ideas with evidence. That is becoming increasingly rare. Ava smiled softly in return. People deserve more than assumptions. As the weeks continued, their professional conversations gradually expanded into something neither had expected. During long drives between project sites, they discussed favorite novels, childhood memories, family traditions, and the neighborhoods that had shaped their values. Ava learned that William still carried the fountain pen his father had given him before his first business meeting. William discovered that Ava kept every handwritten thank you note she had ever received from residents whose lives had been changed by her designs. One rainy evening, after reviewing revised engineering plans, Ava discovered her car refused to start in the underground parking garage. Before she could arrange roadside assistance, William quietly pulled his vehicle alongside hers. Allow me to have someone look at it, he offered calmly. Ava hesitated before answering. I do not want special treatment. William leaned against the open driver's door with an easy smile. This is not special treatment. This is one colleague helping another reach home safely. After a moment, Ava accepted. The drive through Manhattan unfolded beneath reflections of city lights shimmering across rain-covered streets, while gentle jazz played quietly through the speakers. Neither hurried to fill the comfortable silence. As William stopped outside Ava's Brooklyn brownstone, she looked back before stepping out into the cool evening air. You are nothing like the man people describe in magazines. William watched raindrops slide across the windshield before answering with quiet honesty. Perhaps they never stayed long enough to discover who I really am. Ava closed the car door gently and disappeared beneath the warm porch light, leaving William unexpectedly grateful that for the first time in many years, tomorrow had become something he genuinely looked forward to. The final days of October painted New York with brilliant shades of gold and crimson, as Harbor Point slowly transformed from an ambitious construction site into a living promise for thousands of families. Something else had changed just as quietly. The conversations between Ava Carter and William Harrison no longer revolved entirely around engineering reports, zoning permits, or financial projections. They still worked with the same discipline, but every meeting now carried an ease neither of them had expected to find. William had begun asking for Ava's opinion before making important design decisions, not because company policy required it, but because he genuinely trusted her judgment. Ava noticed the difference immediately. The billionaire who had once questioned every detail now listened with patience, encouraging younger architects to share ideas instead of remaining silent around senior executives. Respect had quietly become admiration, and admiration was beginning to grow into something neither of them was ready to name. One Thursday afternoon, Ava returned unexpectedly to the Harbor Point site after realizing she had forgotten a folder containing revised landscape plans. Most of the construction team had already gathered outside for a safety briefing, leaving the temporary project office almost empty. As she searched the conference table, she noticed a leather folder resting beside William's notebook. She intended only to move it aside until a familiar hospital logo printed across the first page caught her attention. Curious, she carefully opened the file and discovered records documenting years of anonymous charitable donations supporting pediatric hospitals, neighborhood libraries, public schools, scholarship funds, and community health centers throughout New York. There were no press releases, no interviews, and no public announcements attached to any contribution. Every donation had been made through private foundations with complete anonymity. As she continued reading, her breathing slowed. The children's cardiac unit where her mother had received life-saving treatment the previous year appeared among the supported programs. Ava gently closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the realization that the hospital had survived because someone had quietly stepped forward when no one else knew help was needed. At that very moment, the office door opened. William entered carrying several rolled construction drawings before noticing the folder in Ava's hands. Neither spoke immediately. Finally, Ava looked at him with quiet disbelief. Why would you keep something this important hidden from everyone? William placed the blueprints on the table before answering calmly. Because people needing help should remain the story, not the person writing the check. Ava studied his face, searching for even the smallest sign of performance or pride. She found neither. My mother recovered in one of these hospitals, she said softly. William nodded with gentle understanding. I know. Her eyes widened. You knew. He glanced toward the construction site visible through the office windows. When our legal department approved your leave request last year, I learned where she was receiving treatment. The hospital director mentioned they were struggling to complete the pediatric renovation. I was fortunate enough to help. Ava lowered the folder slowly, feeling every assumption she had made about him quietly disappear. Before she could respond, several construction workers entered the office to collect updated schedules. William greeted every one of them by name, asking about families, school events, and a newborn grandson one foreman proudly described with photographs. None of the conversations felt rehearsed. Every smile was genuine. As evening settled across the Hudson River, Ava and William stood together, watching the unfinished buildings glow beneath the warm colors of sunset. The skyline shimmered in the distance, while a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh timber and autumn leaves across the site. Ava finally spoke without looking away from the horizon. I spent weeks trying to understand the billionaire everyone else talked about. William answered quietly. And did you find him? She smiled with quiet warmth. No, I found someone much better. For the first time in many years, William laughed without restraint, and somewhere between the rising buildings, the fading sunlight, and the peaceful silence surrounding them, two guarded hearts lowered their defenses just enough to let hope quietly find its way inside. The first week of November arrived with crisp autumn mornings and brilliant golden leaves drifting through the streets of Manhattan as Harbor Point continued taking shape against the skyline. Every completed floor represented another promise fulfilled, and every day spent together quietly transformed the relationship between Ava Carter and William Harrison. Neither of them spoke about the growing affection that had settled gently between them. There was no dramatic confession, no grand declaration, only countless small moments that slowly revealed what both hearts had already begun to understand. William found himself rearranging his schedule so he could attend every site inspection Ava conducted, even when senior executives insisted his time would be better spent in board meetings. Ava noticed that he now listened before speaking, asking questions not to challenge her ideas but to strengthen them. Somewhere along the way, business had quietly become personal in the most natural way imaginable. One Saturday morning, they visited the neighborhood elementary school that would eventually become part of the Harbor Point community campus. Bright murals covered the hallways, while children eagerly welcomed the visitors with handmade posters, thanking everyone involved in building their future school. During an art class, one little girl proudly approached Ava and William carrying a colorful drawing filled with trees, playgrounds, smiling families, and sunlight shining across rows of beautiful homes. Across the top she had carefully written, "A place where everyone belongs." Ava accepted the drawing with genuine gratitude before kneeling to thank the child personally. William quietly watched the exchange, noticing how naturally Ava encouraged every student she met, remembering each name after hearing it only once. As they walked toward the parking lot, he folded the drawing with remarkable care and slipped it inside the leather notebook he carried everywhere. Ava smiled warmly. "You are keeping it?" William nodded without hesitation. "One day this little girl will forget giving us this picture. I hope we never forget why we started building Harbor Point." They decided to stop for lunch at a small family-owned restaurant in Brooklyn where the owner immediately recognized Ava from previous neighborhood meetings. He greeted her like an old friend and proudly introduced William to his family before insisting they try his grandmother's homemade vegetable soup and fresh bread. William watched with quiet admiration as every employee smiled when Ava entered, not because she was famous, but because she remembered birthdays, asked about their families, and treated every conversation with genuine kindness. While walking afterward through Prospect Park beneath brilliant red and golden maple trees, they spoke about childhood dreams instead of construction schedules. Ava shared memories of her grandmother, who believed every home should have one chair facing the sunrise because hope deserved a place to sit every morning. William smiled thoughtfully before admitting that after losing his father, he had buried himself in work because success felt easier than grief. Ava did not interrupt. She simply listened with the patience of someone who understood that healing often began when another person was willing to remain present without trying to solve every pain. As evening approached, they paused beside the quiet lake where the setting sun painted the water with shimmering shades of amber and gold. A cool breeze carried fallen leaves between them, while Manhattan's distant skyline reflected softly across the peaceful surface. Neither noticed how long they had remained there until the park lights slowly flickered on around them. William looked toward Ava with an honesty that surprised even himself. "Before I met you, I believed great buildings changed cities." He paused before continuing with a quiet smile. "Now I think the right people change everything else." Ava looked back at him with warmth filling her eyes. "Maybe that is why the strongest foundations are always built by more than one person." Neither reached for the other's hand. Neither spoke the words that had quietly grown between them over the past several weeks. Yet as they walked together beneath the glowing autumn trees toward the city lights beyond the park, both understood that something far more valuable than success had entered their lives. And for the first time, the future no longer felt like a destination to achieve, but a journey they secretly hoped to share. The second week of November arrived with colder mornings and longer shadows stretching across Manhattan, but inside Harrison Development the atmosphere had become brighter than it had been in years. Employees quietly noticed that William Harrison smiled more often, while Ava Carter carried herself with a peaceful confidence that reflected something deeper than professional satisfaction. Harbor Point was now entering its final construction phase, and the project had become a symbol of hope throughout the city. Newspaper articles praised the innovative design, community leaders celebrated the collaboration, and families eagerly anticipated the day they could finally move into homes built with dignity instead of compromise. Neither Ava nor William realized that as their future slowly came into focus, someone from William's past had already begun planning to destroy it. Victoria Langford had spent years building her reputation as one of New York's most influential public relations consultants. She understood how quickly public opinion could be shaped by carefully selected photographs, perfectly timed rumors, and stories that sounded believable because they contained just enough truth. Watching William grow closer to Ava stirred more than disappointment. It challenged the carefully managed image she had always believed she could control. Quietly, she contacted several entertainment reporters, arranging private conversations that hinted William had recently rekindled an old personal relationship. Days later, photographs appeared online showing Victoria greeting William outside a business conference after unexpectedly approaching him in front of waiting cameras. The images revealed nothing inappropriate, yet the carefully chosen angles suggested a far different story. Headlines quickly followed, repeating speculation until rumor began sounding like fact. Ava tried to ignore every article she encountered. She trusted the man she had come to know rather than strangers searching for dramatic headlines. Even so, uncertainty quietly settled into her heart. William noticed her growing distance almost immediately. During meetings, she remained professional but no longer lingered after conversations ended. Their easy laughter gradually disappeared, replaced by polite silence neither of them understood. Hoping to reassure her, William invited Ava to attend the Harrison Foundation Charity Gala, where Harbor Point would receive its highest civic recognition. He wanted the evening to become an opportunity to finally speak openly about everything they had left unsaid. Ava accepted with quiet hesitation, believing one honest conversation could finally erase every lingering doubt. On the afternoon before the gala, she stopped by Harrison Development to deliver revised presentation materials. As she entered the executive lobby, she froze. Victoria stood beside William near the entrance where photographers had gathered to cover preparations for the following evening. Before William noticed Ava's arrival, Victoria stepped closer and warmly embraced him in greeting. Camera flashes illuminated the elegant lobby, while reporters immediately called out questions suggesting a romantic reunion. William gently stepped back, clearly attempting to answer, but every explanation disappeared beneath another wave of eager voices. From across the room, Ava could hear only scattered fragments carried through the crowded space. The carefully staged moment looked painfully convincing. She quietly lowered the presentation folder in her hands, turned away before anyone saw her, and walked outside into the cool November air. Behind her, William finally escaped the growing crowd and immediately searched the lobby, only to discover that Ava had already disappeared. He called her that evening, hoping to explain everything before misunderstanding took deeper root. The call went unanswered. He sent a thoughtful message asking for nothing more than a conversation. Another message followed a few hours later, promising there was a simple explanation. Ava read every word while sitting alone beside the window of her Brooklyn apartment, watching autumn rain slide across the glass. Her heart wanted to believe him, but the photographs, the headlines, and the memory of what she believed she had witnessed kept whispering a different story. Without anger, without accusation, and without creating a public scene, she quietly decided to step away from the future she had only just begun to imagine, unaware that the following evening would bring them both to the ballroom where truth, heartbreak, and hope would finally collide. The Grand Regency Hotel shimmered beneath thousands of crystal lights as New York's most influential business leaders, philanthropists, architects, educators, and community advocates gathered to celebrate the completion of Harbor Point. Soft music drifted through the elegant ballroom, while conversations blended with the gentle sound of crystal glasses and quiet laughter. Yet beneath the polished beauty of the evening, two hearts carried very different burdens. Ava Carter entered alone wearing the same emerald gown she had chosen weeks earlier, determined to accept the Community Vision Award with grace before quietly leaving behind every unanswered question. She had spent the previous night convincing herself that closure sometimes arrived without explanation. Across the ballroom, William Harrison greeted guests with his usual calm professionalism, but his attention remained fixed on the entrance. The moment he saw Ava, relief and regret appeared together in his eyes. Before he could reach her, another group of reporters approached, requesting photographs celebrating Harrison Foundation's latest charitable initiatives. William politely agreed, hoping to complete the formalities quickly before finding Ava. At that exact moment, Victoria Langford approached once again with effortless confidence, positioning herself beside William before photographers immediately began capturing images. William quietly stepped away, creating respectful distance, but the crowded ballroom made every movement slow. Meanwhile, Victoria noticed Ava watching from across the room and calmly walked toward her carrying a champagne flute. Her smile appeared warm enough for strangers, yet her voice carried only for Ava to hear. "Some people never stop choosing what is familiar," she said gently. "Business partnerships change. Old relationships usually find their way back." Before Ava could answer, Victoria deliberately loosened her grip on the glass. Sparkling champagne spilled across the emerald fabric of Ava's gown, drawing the attention of nearby guests. Victoria offered an apology polished enough to sound sincere while quietly adding, "I truly hope this evening is not too disappointing." The surrounding conversations faded into uneasy silence. Ava stood perfectly still, staring at the stain spreading across her dress before slowly lifting her eyes toward William. At that very moment, he finally reached the gathering, unaware of Victoria's calculated words or actions. He saw only Ava standing silently before him with unmistakable sadness in her eyes. Another wave of reporters surrounded them, calling his name and asking questions about Victoria, investment plans, and future partnerships. William attempted to answer, raising one hand in hopes of calming the growing crowd, but his voice disappeared beneath overlapping questions and flashing cameras. To Ava, the silence lasted forever. Every unanswered message, every misleading photograph, every doubt she had fought so hard to silence returned in a single heartbreaking instant. She stepped forward with quiet dignity, looked directly into William's eyes, and lifted her hand. The sound echoed softly across the magnificent ballroom, bringing every conversation to an immediate stop. Crystal glasses remained suspended in midair while musicians lowered their instruments. No one moved. William neither stepped back nor reacted with anger. Instead, he looked into Ava's eyes and recognized not resentment but disappointment. He understood that the woman standing before him had not lost faith in his character because she wanted to. She had lost faith because he had allowed silence to speak louder than truth. With remarkable calm, William gently reached for her hand, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She remained still. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I should have protected your trust before I protected my schedule." Tears gathered in Ava's eyes as weeks of confusion finally met the honesty she had been waiting to hear. William offered a quiet, grateful smile before leaning forward and placing a brief, respectful kiss upon her forehead, a gesture filled with reassurance, admiration, and sincere apology rather than spectacle. Then he turned toward the silent ballroom and spoke clearly enough for every guest to hear. "Before this evening continues, there is one misunderstanding I will correct. There has never been a relationship between Victoria Langford and me. The rumors were false, the photographs were misleading, and the greatest mistake I made was believing the truth could safely wait. The only person whose respect matters to me is the extraordinary woman standing beside me." The ballroom remained silent for several unforgettable seconds after William Harrison's words echoed beneath the crystal chandeliers. Every camera stayed focused on him, yet for the first time in his professional life, he seemed completely unaware of the attention surrounding him. The only person he saw was Ava Carter standing before him with tears quietly gathering in her eyes, not because she had been embarrassed, but because the truth she had waited so long to hear had finally found its voice. Victoria Langford remained motionless near the center of the room as reporters slowly redirected their questions away from rumor and toward the remarkable honesty unfolding before them. William took one measured step forward, still giving Ava every opportunity to walk away if she chose. Instead, she remained where she was, searching his face with the same careful attention she had once given every blueprint they had created together. "I believed what I saw," she whispered softly. William nodded with complete understanding. "And I believed I could explain everything later. I was wrong." There was no attempt to defend himself, no effort to shift responsibility toward anyone else. He accepted every consequence with quiet dignity. The simplicity of his honesty reached Ava more deeply than any perfect explanation ever could. She lowered her eyes briefly before looking back at him with a gentle expression. "I should have trusted the man I came to know instead of the headlines written by people who never knew either of us." William smiled with genuine relief. "Then perhaps we both learned the same lesson." A warm applause began from the back of the ballroom where several Harbor Point construction workers had been invited to attend the celebration. One by one, teachers, nurses, volunteers, city officials, architects, and community leaders slowly rose to their feet, not because they had witnessed a dramatic public moment, but because they recognized the uncommon courage it took for two people to choose honesty instead of pride. As the applause filled the room, William turned toward the audience once more. "Harbor Point has never belonged to me," he said calmly. "Its heart has always belonged to the woman whose vision reminded every one of us that communities should be measured by hope rather than profit." He extended his hand toward Ava, not as a billionaire making a gesture, but as a man asking an equal to stand beside him. After a quiet breath, Ava accepted his hand. Together they walked onto the stage where the Community Vision Award waited beneath soft golden light. William stepped aside and invited Ava to receive the recognition first. She accepted the award with graceful humility before addressing the audience. Great cities are not built by extraordinary buildings alone. They are built by ordinary people who choose kindness every single day. Her words were followed by another standing ovation that felt even warmer than the first. Later that evening, after the guests had begun leaving, Ava and William stepped onto the hotel terrace overlooking the Manhattan skyline. The city shimmered beneath a clear autumn sky while a cool breeze carried the quiet sounds of distant traffic and the gentle rhythm of the East River. Neither hurried to speak. Finally, William looked toward the skyline before saying, "There is an international expansion waiting for my signature next month. It would require moving overseas for several years." Ava listened quietly. He continued with a peaceful smile. "This morning I declined the offer." She turned toward him with surprise. "That was the opportunity everyone expected you to accept." William nodded. "Success has given me many addresses, but Harbor Point reminded me where I truly belong." Ava smiled softly, remembering the little girl's drawing still resting safely inside William's notebook. "Then let us finish what we started." As they stood together beneath the lights of Manhattan, both understood that trust was not restored by one speech or one evening. It would be rebuilt through ordinary days, honest conversations, shared purpose, and the quiet decision to choose each other again every time life offered them a reason not to. 1 year later, the first light of a spring sunrise spread across the Atlantic coastline outside Newport, Rhode Island, painting the quiet ocean with soft shades of gold and silver. Gentle waves rolled onto the shore while a cool sea breeze carried the scent of salt and fresh flowers through a simple wedding ceremony that reflected everything Ava Carter and William Harrison had learned together. There were no extravagant displays meant to impress strangers, no endless rows of reporters, and no elaborate stage prepared for headlines. Instead, family members, close friends, Harbor Point construction workers, teachers, nurses, volunteers, neighborhood children, and the families whose lives had been transformed by the community they built together filled white wooden chairs facing the ocean. Every person present represented a chapter of the journey that had brought them to this moment. William stood beneath a graceful arch woven with white roses and green ivy, wearing a tailored navy suit that reflected quiet elegance rather than luxury. The confidence that once came only from business success had been replaced by something deeper, a peaceful certainty that the greatest achievements in life could never be measured by financial statements alone. When Ava appeared beside her mother wearing a timeless ivory gown, her natural curls catching the gentle morning light, every conversation faded into respectful silence. She smiled with the same quiet warmth that had first challenged William to become a better man, and he realized that every difficult moment they had endured had simply guided them toward the life standing before them now. During the ceremony, they chose to exchange personal promises instead of traditional vows. William looked into Ava's eyes and spoke with calm sincerity. "You taught me that leadership begins with listening, that kindness leaves a greater legacy than success, and that trust is earned through ordinary choices repeated every single day. I promise that no silence will ever again speak where honesty belongs." Ava smiled through grateful tears before answering softly, "You reminded me that true strength does not come from never making mistakes. It comes from accepting them with humility and choosing to become better because of them. I promise to protect what we build together with the same care I give every community we create." As they exchanged rings, warm applause rose naturally from everyone gathered beneath the morning sky. Nearby, several children from Harbor Point proudly carried framed copies of the colorful drawing that had become the heart of their journey. Across the top, written in careful handwriting, were the words, "A place where everyone belongs." After the ceremony, guests traveled back to Harbor Point for the official dedication of the completed neighborhood. Tree-lined streets echoed with laughter as families unpacked moving boxes. Children raced through playgrounds beneath bright spring sunshine, and neighbors introduced themselves across welcoming front porches. The community library opened its doors for the first time, while the elementary school welcomed students whose futures suddenly felt brighter than they had ever imagined. Standing together beside the public garden they had fought so hard to protect, Ava and William watched life quietly fill every corner of the neighborhood. A young girl approached them carrying a sketchbook and smiled proudly. "One day I want to design places like this," she said. Ava knelt beside her with gentle encouragement. "Then never stop believing your ideas matter." William looked around the neighborhood before taking Ava's hand. Glass towers still rose above the Manhattan skyline in the distance, but for the first time they no longer represented his greatest accomplishment. The homes filled with families, the classrooms alive with hope, the gardens blooming beneath the spring sun, and the woman standing beside him had quietly redefined everything success meant. As evening settled over Harbor Point, lights slowly illuminated one home after another until the entire neighborhood glowed with warmth against the darkening sky. Ava rested her head gently against William's shoulder as they looked across the community they had built together. They both understood that buildings would someday grow old and headlines would eventually fade. But lives changed through compassion, dignity, forgiveness, and unwavering hope would continue long after every story had been told, proving that the strongest foundations are never poured from concrete alone but are built one honest heart at a time.